Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. Again, as always, before we even start, always put some charity in your tzedakah box. I can't say that enough, especially this time of year. And for Hanukkah, I certainly want to encourage everyone to give to charity. There are a lot of families that really need it. So into your tzedakah box before the holidays to give to people. Our Hanukkah party this coming Friday night, that's Friday the 11th at 6 o'clock. We'll be doing a big Hanukkah party at Stonehouse. It's the one legal Hanukkah party you can come to all year, one holiday party you can come to. It's outdoors, so dress warmly. It's a religious gathering, so it's totally legal. And it'll be at Stonehouse. But we're also going to have a toy drive. So bring any new toys, because there's issues with being used toys because of all that's going on in the world. So bring any new toys with you, and then they're going to all be given the week afterwards to children who need them, because there are a lot of children who really do, and I think it's important. All right, so last week we spoke about commentators. And we start getting into commentaries as we get into the Middle Ages that are about mysticism. Now, we're going to start tonight with an introduction to Jewish mysticism. That is not introduction to Kabbalah, and we're going to get to that. But I'd like you to, for our purposes, forget about anything you ever thought you learned about Jewish mysticism, about Kabbalah or anything else. Because when people refer to Kabbalah today, what they're typically referring to is what is actually called Lurianic Kabbalah. It's a system that is an integration of multiple other Jewish mystical systems that was integrated by Rabbi Isaac Luria Ha'ari. And we really need to understand that there's a lot more and a lot deeper and a lot older than what we call Lurianic Kabbalah. So I'd like you to forget anything you think you know about any terms, forget about anything, and we're just going to talk about a little bit about this stuff. And you'll see there's a lot of information over here on behind me on the board as well. So let's back up for a moment in our Jewish texts. Well, the first thing is the Torah, then the writings of the prophet and the writings, the Tanakh, our Bible. Then we have Mishnah and Gemara, the Talmud, as we discussed. In that process, you also start getting some books about mysticism. Now, what is Jewish mysticism? What does that mean? Mysticism in general can be identified in a couple of ways. Number one, we can identify what happens in the neurophysiology of someone who's having a mystical experience. Their sympathetic and parasympathetic systems overflow and shut down. Their hippocampus becomes 400% more active. It's a wonderful book called The Mystical Mind by Achillean Newberg, to University of Pennsylvania neurophysiologists who really go into this in depth. But we can track, that's what's going on in the mind. There's actually a neurophysiological response to that mystical experience. What our sages call and define it as is called yichud, meaning unification. Hasidic sages would call it devakut, cleaving. Not like this, not like this, not like that even, but cleaving. That's why when you look at any mystical poetry from any tradition, whether it's Solomon ibn Gabirol from us, or Shir HaShirim by King Solomon, or whether it's Rumi or Kabir or Khalil Gibran, it's always phrased, the mystical poetry, the poetry of the mystical experience is always phrased in terms of being analogous to the intimate relationship between a man and wife. Okay, and there's a reason. There's no other terms that can express that amazing experience of feeling yourself unified with God. And we have all these techniques that we use, and you really can't study Jewish mysticism without studying Hisbodedus or Jewish meditation, but we're not going to do that this week. We'll do that in a later class. Because this is more just to give a framework, so we're all talking the same language about Jewish mysticism. So the original mysticism all stems right here from the Bible and the Talmud. And then some texts are written. So we have a text called the Sefer HaBahir, first, second century text. It is attributed to Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana from the 1st century, again, Talmudic period. We have this book called Sefer Yetzirah. This is actually attributed, the teachings are attributed to our father Abraham, going all the way back to that. Although, again, it comes around the 2nd century. It's being referred to by 800 to 1000. We have the Zohar, which is many, many volumes. This is attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai from the Talmud. And then there are people who believe it was written pseudepigraphically, that it was written in his name by someone else in the Middle Ages. These are the 3 primary texts of mysticism in Judaism, from which other things come, but it all stems from the Bible, from the Torah specifically. So in Judaism, we have 2 schools of Jewish mystical thought. I put them up here. Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. Maaseh Bereshit means the workings of creation. How and why did God create the universe? And then you have the question, Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot being the imagery that is referred to in the 1st chapter of the book of Ezekiel, his heavenly vision about the heavenly court and God's chariot and all that. And that's really how and why does God sustain the universe? And those are really the only two questions we have in life, aren't they? How and why did God create the universe? How and why does God keep it going? So those are the 2 schools, and those come out of our Bible. They come out of our text. You have sages that are working both those sometimes both of them, and one sage may work this one, another may work this one, for our Jewish history. And then what happens is when we get into the 1500s, the 1500s, specifically when we start getting into Sfat, the area of Sfat with Rabbi Isaac Luria, Luria takes from all these different places and integrates them together, from both Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, and Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot, and integrates them together, all based on text, all based on first Torah, Tanakh, Sefer Yetzirah, etc., and integrates them together. As a result of that, it's called Kabbalah, but really when people talk about today's Kabbalah, they're talking about what he integrated together, how he integrated all the systems and all the teachings and all the writings together. The word Kabbalah actually comes from the Hebrew word lekabel, which means to receive. The idea being that if I want to receive, I can't have a closed fist. I must have an open hand and be willing to receive so that God can interact with me. If there's a question, please chime it on in. So let's take a quick look at some of these different examples, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper. Okay, so Maaseh Bereshit. How and why did God create the universe? If we take our Bibles and we go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I think we may have even done this in the first week, but we're certainly going to do it now a little bit deeper. Let's forget about how it's translated. You may recall from the first week that we talked about that the word Bereshit, the first word of the Torah, is an improper Hebrew word. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It's an improper grammar, improper conjugation. But for argument's sake, and we explored it, I remember, in the first week a little bit more in depth. You can go look at that video. Well, let's just say in the beginning, when it began, how it all began. So Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, how it began, when it all began. Bara Elohim, the God created et hashamayim vet haaretz, the heavens and the earth. Now, Shemayim, the word for heaven, is a combination of the word esh and mayim. Esh being fire, mayim being water. So God created esh, gas, mayim, liquid, v'haaretz, and substance. V'haaretz haita tohu v'vohu, and the substance, the land, was chaos and confusion. V'choshech al pnei tachom, and there was a darkness over the depths of all of this. V'ruach Elohim, and the Spirit of God merachafet, moved very quickly to make a spark al pnei hamayim, on the face of the waters. V'yomer Elohim, and God said, Yehior, there will be light. V'hior, and there was light. V'yira Elohim et haor, and God perceived the light kitov, because it was good. Not God saw the light and it was good. Ki, as most of you know, in Hebrew means because. So God perceived the light because it was good. V'yavdel Elohim, and God separated bein ha'or uvein ha'choshech, between the light and the darkness. The first thing God does in this physical world is create separation. V'yikra Elohim l'or, and God called to the light Yom, day. Choshech kara laila, And he called to the darkness night. And there was evening and there was morning one, day one. So if we look at this, just this first line, what we find is it's really a description of the Big Bang, isn't it? There's all this tohu vavohu, chaos and confusion, and the Spirit of God creates a spark by moving very quickly over it. And then that puts everything in order, and God separates between darkness and light for the first day. So there's nothing that's anti-scientific in this. And certainly it says day one. It doesn't say, was it a 24-hour day or 25-hour day or 24 billion hour day or a 24 billion year day or a 300 billion year day. There's no sun or moon. It just says that's the cycle. From this and from Bereshit, we start to get into creation and Maaseh Bereshit. Maaseh Merkavah, on the other hand, is based on this vision of the Holy Chariot. We find it in the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel. Kind of sounds like somebody on a psychotropic journey with a lot of hallucinogens, but he sees the whole heavenly court and that. We're going to explore a little bit of Maaseh Bereshit, of the workings of creation first. And you may remember some time ago I said that the skeleton key that opens up everything in Judaism is the four-lettered name of God, with the hidden fifth, the little top of the yud, that little infinitesimally small space. I said that a number of weeks ago, I think. And that model, that understanding that yud, he, vav, and he, those four letters at a deeper level, allows us to start to understand both Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, and Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. Now, this is explored a lot in this book, Sefer Yetzirah. This is an amazing translation and commentary by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan of blessed memory. This is more Maaseh Merkavah in some ways. This is more Sefer Bahir. This really goes into the letters and the months and some amazingly powerful stuff as well, and how that interacts with the world. And Zohar is a biblical commentary from a mystical point of view. But let's take a look at what Sefer Yetzirah says at its very beginning, chapter 1, verse 1. And I've done part of the quote right up here on the board. It says, with 32 mystical paths of wisdom engraved, Yah, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the living God, King of the universe, El Shaddai. Let me count them out for you. With 32 mystical paths of wisdom engraved, Yah, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the loving God, King of the universe. El Shaddai, merciful and gracious, high and exalted, dwelling in eternity, whose name is holy and he is lofty and holy. So he, with these 32 paths of wisdom, and by the way, just to put this in perspective, a number of other rabbis and myself studied just the first few verses of Sefer Yetzirah, and it took us months to go through them once a week. I mean, there's so much depth here, we're just going to touch on a little bit. So we have 10 engravings. And God created his universe with 3 books, with text and number, and with communication. Okay? 32 pathways. Number 10. In Judaism, we find the number 10 to be extremely powerful. 10 commandments. God has 10 utterances when God creates the universe. Or 10 times where he speaks as the universe is being created. 10 plagues. Constantly the number 10 is going up. And we have these things called sfirot. Again, this comes from this idea of Sefer Yetzirah. Sfirot, think of them kind of as both microcosmic and macrocosmic. They are energy centers within us, and that is only a model of the energy centers of all of creation. And there's 10, 3 outside of our body and 7 more in our body. And they're based around this name of God. So, let's take a look for a moment. Here's God's name, Yud He Vav He, and it is horizontal. You see it down here as well. Purple and there it's blue. They even got multicolored. And we can see that that structure, which looks like a human being, is actually based around a number of different points. Okay? As an example, that point in the structure right there, where the vav intersects the hey, right here, is really the foundation of the structure. If you pulled that out, the structure would fall down, right? So we call that foundation. Here, in the middle, where the heart is a place of harmony or balance, and we call that place tiferet, which means harmony or balance. At the very top of it, of this human being, because here it looks like a human being as well, we find that it is like a crown. Well, because it's on the top. Each of these letters correspond to a different world, a different part of our service, etc. And they correspond to parts of our body, and there's 10 of them. And they look like this. This is also called Jacob's ladder. You see the same image here. We have 10 points. They are analogous to the 10 digits of 0 through 9. And there's 22 ways of connecting them. Guess how many letters there are in the Hebrew alphabet? There's 22. So God creates the universe through these digits, these numbers, and all of these letters. This is so weird teaching this with no dialogue. Here's what the structure looks like by itself, the 32 pathways. 10 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 22 pathways connecting them. This is what the structure looks like as God's name. And here, if you look at a human being, you can see how these points, these sphirot, 3 of them above us, 3 more outside our head, and then 7 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there in our physical body, how it corresponds to the human being. Are there any questions so far? Because I know I'm going quickly. So if you have one, please type it in on Facebook. I don't think they can't type on YouTube, can they?
Yes.
They can't type a question on YouTube. Okay. So when it says in Sefer Yetzirah, with 32 mystical paths of wisdom engraved Yah, these are the 32 paths. And here's God's name, Yud, He, Vav, and He. This opens up everything. This is what our service is based on. We also call this the 4 worlds. Lowest He being the world of physicality, physical. The Vav above it being physical with a little spiritual. The He above that being spiritual with a little physical. The Yod on top being purely physical or purely spiritual. We call the bottom one Asiyah, the world of making. We call the middle one the world of Yetzirah, the world of forming. The top He, the world of Bria, the world of creating. And Atzilut, emanation. And again, I think I shared this a few weeks ago, the idea of a glass blower, the glass blower being God, creating a blown glass animal. And the animal, when it's by itself, here's a little animal, the unicorn, the elephant, whatever the glass blower is made. But when it stands by itself, that's the world of Asiyah. When it's being formed out of the glass, that is, out of this tube of glass, that is the world of Yetzirah, or that Vav. When it is being just starting to be created and the glass is starting to be blown, that would be the world of creation or Bria. And at the top, the Yud would be the world of God even starting to breathe. And the Kutz of the Yud, that little hidden fifth, is the place of God's intention to create. Yes, there's a question.
Yes. Is this like the chakras?
Yes and no. So chakra means wheel. And as it says here in Sefer Yetzirah, it says very specifically about these, with 3 books, with text, with number, and with communication. The word for text, for books is Sfarim, for text is Sefer, for number is Sfar, and communication is Sipur. So they're not wheels in the same way, but they are energy centers to an extent. They are not linear, the way chakras are generally considered to be linear. They are more like a lightning bolt, as you can see here. They're all over the place. They are both microcosmic and macrocosmic. To the best of my knowledge, the chakra system from India does not include the macrocosmic understanding. However, there is a terrific legend, story, myth, whatever you want to call it. We attribute Sefer Yetzirah, this book, to our ancestor, Father Abraham. Now, let's go back in the Torah for a minute. The text says that Abraham leaves Canaan for a while. And he goes to the east. And he ultimately comes back and he's remarried to a woman named Keturah, which means the spicy one. And Keturah is actually, the Midrash says that she is Hagar, who was converted to Judaism. But there is a belief that is cross-cultural that Abraham learns this from God, this whole modality and system. And he goes to the East and he teaches it in India, where it becomes known as the chakra system. I can't comment on which came first. I can't comment on any of it other than I think that's an interesting story. But there are parallels. This is a bit more, actually significantly more detailed than the chakra system, especially as how it's understood in the West, which only looks at the main 7 chakras that someone has. This, as you can see, is not just one line. There's actually multiple lines going through it. There's 3 vertical lines. There's multiple different ways of interacting. I hope that helps a little bit. If that helped, please give a thumbs up as you're typing it. So we have these pathways, and creation happens from them. Often, sadly, today people go and take a class in Kabbalah, and they go take a class in Kabbalah and they find that the teacher says to them, or the rabbi says, this is the sphera of chesed, of compassion, and this is of bina, of wisdom, or of an understanding, and this is chokhmah, of wisdom, and this is tiferet, of balance. If that's how you learn these things, then really all you're learning is dogma, isn't it? That's not how this is supposed to be taught. It's organic. If we look at the structure, again, we find that the place of foundation right there, if I erased that whole piece, if I erase that, the structure would fall down. That place is called foundation. We see that right here. This is the place of harmony. All the lines connect to this one. It's right there. We call that harmony, or tiferet, balance. I don't think that any of this is supposed to be learned as dogma, but rather as experienced, because otherwise it's, what meaning does it have? So that's why we're backtracking pre-Lurianic Kabbalah, where it's like, this is chesed, this is gevura, etc., which is already way before the Hasidic movement, which incorporates a lot of this stuff. So there's 32 pathways, 22 pathways, 10 energy centers. Any other questions on that so far? Okay, if there are, please type them in. Now, you may not have realized that you hear these words every Shabbos, every time the Torah comes out. Because of, and we're not going to get into the depths of it, but because of how they each feel, we have chesed, we have gevura, we have these different names for these centers, and we hear them every time that the Torah comes out. And I'll touch the places when it happens. Lecha Adonai hagedula. Greatness is also compassion. V'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'achod. Kikol b'shamayim, which means everything in the heavens. V'aretz, and the earth. That would be the foundation, yesod, and the ground of malchut. So all this is hidden in our liturgy. I think that's really important to realize. You don't need to learn all this stuff, this framework, in order to have a Jewish mystical experience that will come from Hesperides, from meditation. It will come from our liturgy, but it's all hidden there in our liturgy and in our prayers. And that's the secret to lekabel, to being received. So hopefully this is helping a little bit just as a structure, okay? But Jewish mysticism is hidden throughout our text. So I don't remember if we went through in this class or not, but so let's take a quick look at our liturgical prayer, the Ve'ahavta. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Ve'ahavta es Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'kol nafshecha. Nafshecha meaning soul. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, and you shall love the Lord your God b'chol levavcha. B'chol means with all, and levavcha is normally translated as your heart. But the way you say your heart is levcha. So it's hidden right there. Why does God say levavecha? Why are there two vets? Because God wants us to love God with both our good heart and our heart that wants to do not such good things, or good inclination or not good inclination. Okay, that's an example of how things are just hidden in our text or hidden in our liturgy. Again, Adonai Hagedula. That whole chant as the Torah comes out is designed to help awaken each of these energy centers. How am I doing so far, or is this going too fast? Please let me know with a thumbs up, or if it's going too fast with a thumb sideways or a thumbs down in some way. Okay, this is kind of challenging to do it this way. So here we have again the number 10 and 10 energy centers. Now think of them not just as energy centers, but also gateways to the universe and gateways to a macrocosmic experience. And I want to share something with that. The purpose of light is to light up darkness, right? And we're going to next week, we're going to have the last class that we do prior to taking a break for all of everything. And we may or may not have class actually next week. We'll let you know. But most of you know what this is. This is not a menorah. This is a Hanukkah. It's different. A menorah only has 7 branches. 3, 3, and 1. This is a Hanukkah. It has 9 branches on it. 8 for the nights of Hanukkah and 1 a shamash and the helper. But if we look at these very festive candles my wife put in, we see that actually, although there are 9 candles, it opens up, it enlightens 10 pathways of darkness, right? Because these candles on the outside also light up what's out on this side, right? So there's 1 pathway, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. When we have the entire Hanukkah lit up, we are now enlightening all of our 10 sfirot. That's part of what this holiday is about, to become lights unto the world, to be God's lights. Even when we have only one night, 1 candle on the first night, we're still lighting up 1, 2, 3 pathways, aren't we? And those 3 pathways are these pathways up here, the ones that are outside of our body of Keter, Chokhmah, and Bima, crown, wisdom, and understanding. Again, we're only touching on a little bit of this. I don't want to get too involved. We will be having a series of classes on Jewish mysticism meditation that will come around in the spring. But even just the first night of Hanukkah, we're waking up all of the sfirot, the 3 that are around us. And then each night we start moving down and awakening each of our sfirot, our energy centers, our communication pathways. That makes sense to everyone and how powerful the Hanukkah really becomes then. Okay? It's much more than just the oil. It's much, much more than that. And again, next week, if we have class next week, and the only challenge is that typically we pull out in our family, we pull out, I think we have something like 11 Hanukkahs or something like that. So we kind of cover the whole area. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but we will see about doing that next week. Again, Hanukkah is about awakening these sfirot that we hear right here. Are there any questions so far on that? Hopefully this is staying pretty clear. If there are, please type them on in. So the foundation of Jewish mysticism, forgetting about Kabbalah, is how and why does God create the universe? How and why does God sustain the universe? And the formation of that has to do with, first of all, this 32 pathway concept. And then it also has to do with the 22 letters, which are much more deeply explained in this book of the Bahir. So I'm going to give you an example of something for the, what's the eraser? Something about the Bahir, just to give an example. I hope I can erase all this. If you don't have it, you can always email the temple some way how we will get it to you. I'm just going to erase the top here and look at a couple of things. Again, this comes from Bahir. Let's erase this. According to the Bahir, we've already looked at these 10 points, right? But each of the pathways in Sefer Yetzirah, each pathway corresponds to a different letter. And every letter has its own powerful meaning. So as an example, this is the letter Aleph in Hebrew. It has the numerical value of 1. I believe we talked about this on the first week as well. But it's more than that, because we could look at this and we could say that this letter is actually composed of that letter, a Vav, and 2 Yuds. This is a Yud, and that is a Vav. Okay? So hopefully everyone can see that in that way, that it is both a Vav and 2 Yuds. Now, when we look at numerical values again, Yud has the numerical value of 10. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. So we have 10 plus 10. Vav has the numerical value of 6. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. So Aleph equals 1, but Aleph also equals 26. 10 plus 6 plus 10. It's the only silent letter in the Hebrew alphabet. 26 is a very special number because this name of Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey also has a value of 26. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Hey is 5. So we only really know God's name in true silence, in that real silent place. That's an example from Bahir. The idea that the letters are, this isn't my stuff, I'm not that smart. The idea is that the letters have power in and of themselves, both numerical value and as insights and guides to help us understand things. Or, as another example, this is the letter Tzadi. Tzadi is the name of the letter for those of you who do not read Hebrew. A tzaddik is a righteous person, a purely righteous person. And just as a little other things, this is the Hebrew letter Nun, which stands for Navi or prophet. We talked about Yud being God's name. So the Bahir teaches us that a tzaddik, a righteous man, a purely righteous human being, is a prophet who has bent his back so that he can carry God's name. Every letter has meanings like this. Every one of them. And that's what Sefer Yetzirah goes into. As we understand more and more of those letters, we start to understand more and more what is God really saying to us. And we start to understand more and more what is the pathway to experience unification with Hashem, with God. And it goes on, by the way. There's all sorts of, how they look at different letters in here and Bahir, and how one is, how they combine the letters. It all comes from all the letter mysticism comes from this book as a source text. So Jewish mysticism ultimately is about this concept of yichud, unification. By the way, that's the same term that we use to describe what a husband, a bride, and a groom do when right after they break the glass. They're supposed to go in a private chamber and have yichud. They're supposed to unify their souls physically as well as spiritually. It's called yichud. Now, I want to give you one or two more terms, and I know this is a lot, so I want to call it a night at that point. I want to give you another concept because it is so important. This, what we've been talking about so far, is an intellectual understanding of the Jewish mystical experience and framework. So one great rabbi once said there's two types of people in Jewish mysticism. There's the Kabbalist, who experiences things. Those are few and far between. And then there's a Kabbalologist, the person who can tell you all the names of the Sefirot and of the four worlds and tell you all that dogma. But our purposes are not to create Kabbalologists. If you want that, go read Gershon Sholem. He's the greatest one probably who ever lived. Rather, it's about experiencing God and experience the joy of being unified with God. and that the only thing that comes out of that is a desire to serve. Ultimately, any experience of Yehud, whether it's just a brief experience in a flash, or whether it's a flash that stays with you your whole life, or whether it's something that you tap into on a regular basis, can only lead a person to be overwhelmed by that love by that divine love, and to want to serve God, want to serve the world. That's what this is more about. So it's not just by studying what these systems are. It's also about experience. Again, those neurophysiologists, Akili and Newberg, talk about how our brain chemistry changes into a unitary state of being or a heightened state of awareness when we're in the zone with athletics, when we're meditating, when we make love and have an orgasm, when we dream. In all these different types of experiences, our brain chemistry changes, which is a reflection of what's going on in our spirit. In Judaism, excuse me for 1 second, just because I have a funeral coming up. In Judaism, there are two, the same way that there was how and why is the world created, how and why is the world sustained. There are two types of meditative experiences. The first one is called hitlahavut, which means to be inflamed. This is the ecstatic dancing, the ecstatic singing. This is where everything's so amazing, you just get high from it. And you expand and you explode out into the universe in such a way that you become Yehud, unified with God. If you've ever done folk dancing for 7 hours, or if you've ever chanted even kirtan singing or something like that for many hours, or if you've, in other traditions, or if you've chanted or danced or whatever it may be, you're in the zone, that's hitlahavut. Most of our systems that we study are not hitlahavut, or that we experience are not hitlahavut, but we do a whole lot that is called hitbodedut, or if you're Ashkenazi, hispodedus. This is where you're going inward. Now, part of the thing to understand with that is the word itself tells us what kind of meditation is. It is in a form of grammar that is called binyan hitba'el. It's a self-reflexive grammar, that you're doing something to yourself. The root of the word, depending on whom you ask, and our sages say both are true, is either bod or boded. These two words mean a branch and alone. Hispodedus is where we use techniques like breathing, study, verses, things like that, to go inward, to become aware of that which is infinitely small within us. And since infinity equals infinity, whether it's infinitely small or infinitely large, as we do that, we become connected to the entire universe, like a branch on a tree. We become more and more aware of our smallness. And in doing so, we rise to be aware of everything. So like a branch in a tree, we can be aware of our leaves. But also, as we become more aware of our branch, where we are in our relationship to life, we become aware of all the other branches, which are people. We become aware of the tree trunk, of the roots of the tree, and how it connects to all the earth and to every other tree on the planet. That's hispodedus. We will learn some meditative techniques around that to achieve that purpose, most of which, or many of which, revolve around breath. There's a fabulous book called Jewish Meditation, again, it's by this Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. It's 40 years old, and still, in my mind, is the best book on an introduction to Jewish meditation, Jewish meditative practices. Again, it's called an introduction to, it's called just Jewish Meditation by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And that becomes part and parcel of learning this structure of the universe. So again, how and why did God create the universe? How and why did God sustain the universe? That's all talked about in Torah, Tanakh, Bible, and Talmud. we learn from these two texts how both the numbers and letters create forming of the universe and still are true with us today, and how to use them to be more awake and in relationship. We understand the 32 pathways, which is 22 pathways and 10 points, the 10 sefirot and the 22 pathways, how it corresponds to God's name, which is the root of it all. That is the skeleton key. How it's God's name, and how that then leads us to an understanding, or more than an understanding, an experience of the world. Through using Hispodadus or Hitlavus, we can start experiencing consciously, using this as the road map. So that when you look at an image like this, which is right there, it doesn't look like just a bunch of lines and letters. Rather, you realize it is a roadmap for meditation upon which, if we travel, we can become aware of all of creation. I think that's a good place to kind of pause, because I know it's a lot of information to kind of wrestle with. As, or most importantly, right now, is Hanukkah begins Thursday night. Again, we're having our Temple Hanukkah party on Friday night. Everyone is welcome. It's at the Stone House at the Westlake Village Inn in Westlake Village. It's between Lindero Canyon and Westlake Boulevard off Agoura Road. And we will be having, we have this big 12, 15-foot Hanukkah menorah that we use and we light up. That will be lit up. It's outside, so you can feel very safe. There's plenty of room. Even if we had 400 people there, everyone could be 6 feet distant. I mean, it's that big of a space. There's food and drink. It starts at 6 o'clock. Please come early if you'd like to get some food and some drink. There'll be music and all sorts of dreidel and all sorts of other fun stuff. And we need to remember when we do Hanukkah that the light is to light up the darkness, and that every time we place a new candle into the Hanukkah, or not. This is why these candles are really pretty looking, but they don't stay very well. Every time we place a new candle into the Hanukkah, we are creating more pathways of light, both outside, but also inside. So that Hanukkah is the time to awaken our souls. It is the time to show that we are spiritual beings. It says in the book of Proverbs, Nishmat Adam Ner Adonai, the soul of the human being is the candle flame of God. Hanukkah is about awakening our souls and being that candle flame of God and shining the light. That's part of what Hanukkah is about. So I hope this is good. If you have questions, you can always email events@nersimcha.org and they will get it to me. If there's any questions, please type them in right now. But I hope to see people this Friday night. It will be a lot of fun. And thanks to the Supreme Court's decision last week, it is totally legal what we're doing. And Stonehouse is kind enough to give us their space and keep their restaurant open for takeout. So you just have to order it there and then take it out and walk 10 yards and you can come eat or drink as we light the Hanukkah candles and we celebrate and dedicate ourselves, because the word Hanukkah means dedication, as we dedicate ourselves to being the candle flame of God consciously. Thank you as always for being good to me and letting me say these things. It is so, I can't wait till we can have classes in person again. But I thank you for all that, and happy Hanukkah, Chag Hanukkah Sameach, and I look forward to seeing people hopefully this Friday evening. We also have a fundraiser. I invite everyone because it is dearly needed. A Laka launch that, buy tickets. If the Laka, when we launch it next Sunday, if it lands on your square, you could win a trip to La Costa or to a resort in Vegas or golf at a major golf resort or private clubs or all sorts of things. Sherwood, all sorts of really wonderful pieces of fine art, all of which will be a lot of fun. And you can buy the tickets and it supports the synagogue. It's all tax deductible. So I hope to see you on Friday for Hanukkah, on Sunday for the Laka launch. And again, thank you for being here once again. Share it with friends, and I'll see you soon, I hope. Thanks.